Chapters 8 and 9 in the book of Revelation belong to the most complex chapters in all of the Bible. Welcome to another tidbit from Revelation. We look into chapter 9. The storyline in itself is strange. A star is fallen from heaven to earth, and that star is given a key to open for the shaft of the bottomless pit or the abyss. From the abyss rises locust, a swarm of locusts that tortures, torments, and plagues the earth, and which is described as we move on in the story as an enemy army, looking like horses and riders, and he tries to count them. And in the end, as a result of these tribulations, there is no conversion. Sounds apocalyptic? It is. If it looks like a strange modern movie, that is not quite wrong, because modern movies at times are inspired by these admittedly strange parts of the book of the Bible. So is there any key? First of all, there are several keys, and that's part of the complexity. In these chapters, you have a combination of symbols from the Old Testament, but there are a lot of them put together. Let's look at some of the major keys to get an understanding just of what is going on here. First, as you read in chapter 9, verse 13 and onwards, you will find that this takes place at a certain time and certainly a certain place. Then the sixth angel, it is said, blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar before God. This is my point here. The events described are taking place on the basis of something that happens in heaven. So you have this movement in the book of Revelation between what takes place in heaven and what happens on earth. Everything is in the final end said to be under the control of God. This is a word of comfort. If you meet tribulation in life, or you look at the tribulations of history, the Christians are comforted by this storyline. God in heaven is in control, even though it may at times be difficult to see. Now, the heavenly scene here points us to that part of the heavenly sanctuary which we usually call the holy. And this is exactly in agreement with the opening of the seven trumpets, where you have a scene with the prayer, the incense rising from the altar of incense, exactly in this place, in the holy. So far, we see history from the aspect of the holy compartment of the heavenly sanctuary, but we will move into the most holy when we open for the seventh trumpet. But so far, we're still in a time where God listens to prayers. We are not come to the final end. This is not beyond the day of probation, or the end of probation. But this observation that it is something that is called forward by events or explained by events in the heavenly sanctuary also helps us to understand that although these are earthly events, they are part of a major cosmic struggle. There are several features that highlight that. First of all, the chapter begins, as mentioned, when the fifth angel blew his trumpet. And I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth, and he was given this key to the abyss. Now, when you have a description of a star fallen from heaven, no doubt that there are historical references, symbols of leaders or people in God who apostatized, but the main reference is to Lucifer, or the son of the morning star, in Isaiah 14. Where the spiritual power behind the great arch enemy of the people of God in the Old Testament, the king of Babylon, where the spiritual power is described as an angel fallen from heaven, an angel who tried to reach and achieve the seat at God's throne. So behind these earthly battles throughout history, the earthly tribulations of the people of God, behind all that you have Lucifer himself, the evil one. Now the other feature that points to that is that when those locusts that arise from the abyss are described as the enemy army, it is said they have a king over them. And that is described in verse 11. They have as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit. His name is in Hebrew Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon. John is the only New Testament writer who has this kind of reference to in Hebrew it is said. And in the book of Revelation you have that twice. The other example is in chapter 16, speaking about the place called in Hebrew Armageddon. Now, both these references to a Hebrew text or Hebrew expression comes from one single source, that is the hymn, the elegy, the funeral dirge for the king of Babylon in Isaiah 14. The king of Babylon here described as Lucifer, who achieved or strived to get the place in heaven along God on his throne. Now in 14 verse 20, the Greek apolumi is used, or the version of that verb is used to describe the fallen angel as a destroyer, somebody who destroyed, of course from the Septuagint or Greek translation of the Old Testament. So we are set in the context of a great controversy. Throughout history, it has been common to pinpoint some historical aspects of this prophecy. In earlier reformatorial age and onwards, people spoke about the Muslims that arose and other anti-Christian forces or movements that have arisen on the scene of history. I'll not discharge such, but just remind you that there is a larger context than just earthly history. Now, next to another key. We are continuing from chapter 8, a focus on the theme of fertility. Remember, a third of the earth was burned up in fire, then a third of the sea, and then the third of the rivers and the springs, and then a third of sun, moon, and stars. The Holy Land, or the land with all its fertility, the land that was protected by God, was under attack. And as you move along in the book of Revelation, everything is destroyed or everything is attacked. Now the abyss is opened and a swarm of locusts devour. This imagery of locust is taken directly from the Old Testament. The small or minor prophet of Joel is speaking about it and using a locust swarm to illustrate the day of judgment, and speaks about it as a warning to the people of God. So this is in the context of judgment is on its way. God's judgment is near. This is the warning sign, a swarm of locusts. Now, the enemy forces, when we come to the sixth trumpet, is described in this peculiar manner. Let's read in verse 16 and 17 in chapter 9. The number of mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number, and this is how I saw the horses in my vision. Now, you may remember that this particular literary feature of first hearing a number or hearing an item and then seeing it is typical in the book of Revelation as a sort of identification. This is the same group. And under this breaking of the sixth seal, John was in a similar way shown the army of God. First he heard their number, 144,000. Then he saw the crowd in the white linen. Here, when the sixth trumpet sounds, he hears the number of the enemy forces, then he sees them. So there's this parallel. And the parallel may go even deeper when you look at the end of the chapter. The end of chapter 9 is not the end of the 6th trumpet, but the end of the chapter. So we will have to move on. And it ends with a negative. In spite of all that happened, in spite of all the tribulations and all the problems and the enemy attacks, there was no one who repented. This is how we read the rest of mankind in verse 20, who were not killed by these plagues, did not repent of the works of their hands, nor give up worshipping demons and idols of gold and silver and bronze and stone and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk, nor did they repent of their murders or their sorceries or their sexual immorality or their thefts. No conversion. We end with a kind of question. Is it really true? Did not anyone repent? And with this question hanging in the air, chapter 9 ends, but chapter 10 will provide an answer. It will describe the basis of the preaching which led to conversions. Welcome back to another tidbit as we look next time at chapter 10. Thank you for listening.